I will be presenting the case analysis for HS versus the Western Dubuque Community School District and Keystone AEA. Our student, HS, was born with Down syndrome. She lives within the Keystone AEA area and the Western Dubuque Community School District. She received early access services beginning after birth due to her diagnosis with Down syndrome and the needs that she had. She attended early childhood special education classes at Western Dubuque Community School District and moved from Piasta Elementary to Drexler Elementary in kindergarten due to the life skills program that was available only at Drexler Elementary within the Western Dubuque district. In first grade, parents chose to send HS to the local Catholic school, and that's kind of where our case begins. This is where there were some issues that arose with providing services between the public or non-public school setting. So each year, the IEP team met and, of course, did their annual review of HS's IEP. In kindergarten, when she moved to Drexler, she received 56% of her education in the general education classroom with her peers and had para support for 375 minutes per day. At the end of kindergarten in April, her annual review came due and changes were made to begin when she began first grade. In first grade, HS would only be in the general education setting 21% of her day, with para support 90 minutes per day, which is really that 21% ended up being about 90 minutes of her day. So anytime when she was not in the special education setting, para support would be available. So the parents had decided after the April IEP meeting, looking into first grade, that they would like to place all three of their daughters at the local non-public school. They did state that there were no concerns with the IEP that led to this change in placement, that they just wanted their children to have a religious background in their education as well. So, special education funds were wanted by the parents and by the school to pay for HS to have para support in that non-public school setting. When parents enrolled their daughters at the non-public school, the school enrolled the older two daughters immediately, but took time before granting enrollment for HS due to her needs and her current IEP. And so the non-public school had scheduled meetings and had communication with the public school about the needs of HS so they could determine if it was a good placement for her and if they could adequately meet her needs. Part of their discussion was whether or not they could have a shared para between the non-public and the public school to help meet her needs. And so that's where that special education funding to pay for those para needs comes into play. Also on that IEP review from kindergarten, looking toward first grade, they had decreased para minutes to 90 minutes per day, and parents now wanted that time to be increased, again from 90 minutes back to the 375 minutes that she was given during kindergarten. And that was part of, it was that time that they wanted the public school to pay for at the non-public school. Parents also wanted HS to spend more time with her non-disabled peers because remember, there was going to be a significant change between the amount of general education time she had with her non-disabled peers from kindergarten to her first grade placement. Western Dubuque and the AEA believe that if the student left the public school setting by choice of the parents, that they were also choosing to leave the IEP services. Western Dubuque and the AEA were not interested in sharing a para or paying for the para. They recommended a reevaluation to get a better understanding of HS and her needs because a reevaluation had not been done recently. And parents did consent to this. And then Western Dubuque also believed that special education in that highly modified alternative classroom, the life skills program at Farley Elementary, was in the best interest of meeting HS's needs academically. So there are several laws that are applicable in this case. IDEA and FAPE are, of course, important and applicable here. In exchange for accepting federal money to assist in educating children with disabilities, we know the state and local agencies must agree to make free and appropriate public education available to all qualifying children in their jurisdiction. And so, although HS was not planning to attend a public school, there was still funding being given toward her education, and it was believed that in order for her to have a free and appropriate education in a non-public setting, these rights or this para support should follow her. LRE, in determining the educational placement, the school must ensure that a child with a disability is not removed from education in age-appropriate regular classrooms solely because of needed modifications in the general education curriculum. So that significant change in time with her non-disabled peers in that general education setting is where we're looking at least restrictive environment. So why did there need to be such a big shift from kindergarten to first grade, especially when the kindergarten teacher mentioned in report card comments that HS had made considerable growth and she was pleased with the gains she had made in the kindergarten classroom. And so taking her out of that general education setting and providing her with more of that life skills setting was in question, and they wondered if that was the best placement for her, if that was truly her least restrictive environment. Prior written notice became a big part of this case. We know that parents must receive prior written notice anytime a change of placement or programming is made, and although there was an IEP review and prior written notice provided, it wasn't very detailed. And so parents believed that they did not completely understand that there would be a change in placements from that time in the general education classroom with a little bit of pullout to spending most of her time now in this other program, this life skills program. And so they don't believe that they were given notice of this or had a voice in choosing this change of placement. And then the change in programming, just the amount of time that the para would be spending with the student, they also feel like that wasn't very clearly spelled out for at the IEP meeting for them to gain an understanding of what was happening. Iowa Code shares that the student is entitled to publicly funded paraprofessional services while attending the non-public school. And this is really at the meat in this case. They believe that HS can be successful in that non-public school environment, but needs that support of a paraprofessional for a variety of reasons, including safety, health, and academic support. So the decision that was made is that the respondents, AEA and Western Dubuque, failed to comply with the prior written notice requirement of the IDEA during that March 2011 meeting when revising her plan and changing her educational placement for the next school year. So when they were looking at moving her from her time in the general education classroom to spending most of her day in the life skills classroom. Based on the information in the record, the degree of removal from the general education environment did not represent her least restrictive environment. So because she was making progress in the general education classroom and in the current program that she was in, that change didn't have enough data or backing to present itself as providing the least restrictive environment. The respondents violated Iowa Code by inactivating her IEP and refusing to provide services other than speech and language after she enrolled at the non-public school. And so again, this comes back to even though she is not at a public school, she still has rights and should be provided the services listed in the IEP. And the private school agrees to implement the resulting, if they choose to implement the resulting IEP, then Western Dubuque and the AEA will provide that special education service of having a paraprofessional available to HS as stated in her IEP. So as I read through this, this case was interesting to me for a variety of reasons. First of all, I work for Western Dubuque currently. I work at what was known as Drexler Elementary. It's currently Farley Elementary School. I work with the general education teacher and the AEA consultant involved in this case. I also recognized several other names as I read through this case. And so as I was reading, I tried to keep an open mind. And what I have found is I believe Western Dubuque really did fail to include the information necessary in the prior written notice to justify the changes they were making. There may have been good reason behind those changes, but it wasn't spelled out for parents and for the members of the IEP team to understand why those changes needed to be made. And there wasn't data to support the change. HS did appear to be making growth based on the reports from our kindergarten teacher, and so again, those changes in the IEP may not align with her least restrictive environment. Again, there wasn't enough data or information shared to justify such drastic changes from spending that time in the general education setting to now being moved into the special education setting for the majority of her day. And then finally, based on the Iowa code that requires school districts and AEAs to make paraservices available to children attending non-public schools in the same manner and to the same extent they're provided in the public schools, this really was the responsibility of the district and the AEA, whether or not HS was a student that was enrolled in their public school or enrolled in the local non-public school. And so I feel like this section of Iowa code really spells out that it was the school's responsibility to provide this. And in this case, the school was refusing. And so I believe that the decisions that were made were accurate and justified. Implications for school leaders. What I learned from reading this is that decisions need to be made based on data, and that documentation of the data needs to be included so that everyone's on the same page and everyone can go back and clearly see why decisions are being made. It's also important to ensure that all team members are included in the IEP and understand the changes. There was a point in this case where the parents said they really didn't understand what was being done with their daughter. And so making sure that everyone understands and knows what's happening is really important. Spelling out those changes in detail. If you take time to really spell out those changes, that time on the front end is going to save you time later on from having these disputes and resolutions. And then leaders need to be in the classroom and ensure that services are being provided as discussed. I just think anytime we're talking about IEPs and having the children in their least restrictive environment, this is really important. And then be open to asking questions, thinking outside the box, and being an active member of the team. So my questions for you, who is responsible for ensuring the needed information is on the prior written notice? This was really the deciding factor in much of this case. And then what checks and balances should be in place when making substantial changes to an IEP during an annual review. So this could include changes in the percent of time with non-disabled peers or para-minutes. So what is the principal's role in this? Thank you.